That term gets thrown around a lot. I've got a mitochondrial dysfunction. And what does that actually mean? It's not that you have some genetic problem. There's a real difference there. And a lot of people will feel like they are a victim of this mitochondrial dysfunction because someone told them that, when really a more accurate statement would be they're actually functioning in a way that's keeping you in protection. They're making extracellular ATP to send signals from cell to cell to say, hunker down and protect. It's not safe. So, again, the common denominator here is still the autonomic nervous system. And that is why doing the brain retraining, the vagus nerve toning, the emotional work, the trauma processing is one of the direct things you can do to influence your mitochondrial dysfunction.
Be honest. Some days do you think, okay, I think I've pretty much heard it all now when it comes to recovering from chronic symptom conditions? I've watched all the videos, read the books, listened to the podcasts, and I'm skeptical that there's anything new to learn here. If so, know that I just might occasionally have those days too. And then someone like today's guest sits down with me and I realize, like, nope, we are still just scratching the surface here. Every time she's here, I feel like I need to be taking notes, like with both hands, because she gives us so many new ways to understand what's actually going on in the brain, the nervous system, and the body. So, if you're craving fresh information and different angles and those, like, oh, that makes sense now kind of moments, this interview is for you. If you're new here, I'm Raelan Agle, and here we explore the science and lived experience of recovery from chronic fatigue syndrome, long COVID, and other chronic conditions, focusing on what truly helps stop the chronic symptoms for good. And today I am thrilled to be joined by the incredible Dr. Cathleen King, founder of the Primal Trust Academy and Community, joining us from Utah. Dr. Kat is one of the clearest voices, bridging neuroscience, trauma healing, and practical recovery tools. And her personal journey through more than a decade of chronic illness gives her work incredible depth and a lot of compassion. So, in this interview, we are going to talk about what's really going on when your mitochondria malfunction, how to simplify recovery when you've been trapped in endless protocols and tracking and fear loops, and a practical way to expand activity even on bad days without backsliding, plus so much more. If you've been waiting for an interview that pulls everything together in a way that actually feels usable, this is it. So let's dive in. Dr. Kat, amazing to have you back. Thanks for being here.
So glad to be with you again.
I am always so excited for our conversations because you have just so much experience, personal experience, an abundance of professional experience. I feel like you've seen it all. And I learn so much from every time I speak with you, and you explain things in ways where it just really makes sense. So I thought today we could go into some of those core things that people are understandably continually confused about or needing more clarification on as they go through their journey. Because there's no exact recipe. So understandably, people feel lost at multiple points. Like, am I doing this right? What is going on? So lots of things around that. But I thought one that would be a great one to talk about to start is our mitochondria. Because we hear a lot about our mitochondria in various forums and platforms around CFS and long COVID and, my mitochondrial dysfunction and people wondering if they can get better because they've been told about this mitochondrial dysfunction and they're not sure if the things that we talk about mind body work and nervous system regulation and brain training will have any effect on them because of this. So if you could provide some clarification on that, I think that would be incredibly helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And this is such an important topic because, like you said, that term gets thrown around a lot. I've got a mitochondrial dysfunction. And what does that actually mean? So, to help listeners understand, there is certain types of mitochondrial genetic dysfunctions that you would have known when you were little. Like those things affect you throughout your whole life. And then there is mitochondria, I'll just say downregulation that can happen as a result of buildup of toxins, pathogens, stress in the system. And that's a different type of dysfunction in that it's adapting to a situation. It's not that you have some genetic problem. You would there's a real difference there. And a lot of people will feel like they are a victim of this mitochondrial dysfunction because someone told them that, when really a more accurate statement would be your mitochondria right now are under functioning in the way that causes you to have energy to be able to thrive, but they're actually functioning in a way that's keeping you in protection. So it's not about, it's less about a dysfunction and more about how they're functioning. So the mitochondria, they are our powerhouse. They're our body battery. And they're either making ATP for us to, go and live our purpose in the world, or they're making extracellular ATP to send signals from cell to cell to say, hunker down and protect. It's not safe. In both cases, the mitochondria is functioning. It's just functioning differently. So, what do we do about that? Well, from a, holistic integrative medical model, they're going to say we need to clean up the toxins, we need to clean up the pathogens to get your mitochondria functioning properly, which is there's truth to that. Our mitochondria will get this signal of there's problems in the body. It'll signal something called cell danger response when we have a toxin or a pathogen burden. However, there is a signal that is foundational to the mitochondria that uh, overrides everything, and that's the signal from the autonomic nervous system. So ultimately, the mitochondria are receiving a signal from the autonomic nervous system of safe versus unsafe, too much toxins versus it's safe to open up the cell wall and receive nutrients. And so when people go down these rabbit holes of like, oh, my mitochondria are not functioning because of this pathogen or this toxin, they're missing a key component. There's truth, and the way we detox those things is by having an autonomic nervous system that is up and uh, balanced and regulated so that we can detox metals and molds and pathogens. And then what will happen is, as the autonomic nervous system gets the signal of, yeah, it's time to detox, so will the mitochondria get a signal of, like, let's help the body detox. And eventually, let's help the body go back to thriving. So, again, the common denominator here is still the autonomic nervous system. And that is why doing the brain retraining, the vagus nerve toning, the emotional work, the trauma processing is one of the direct things you can do to influence your mitochondrial dysfunction. So, hopefully, that helps to, shed some light on that term a bit.
Yeah. So, if I'm understanding this correctly, in many cases of conditions like chronic fatigue syndrome and long COVID and these many other chronic syndromes, you will see that your mitochondria potentially you will see that they are functioning differently
Yeah, they're
than they
functioning
normally do.
differently. That's a good word.
Right.
It has a different type of function going on. Yeah.
Right. But this is a symptom, a result of what's
Yeah.
happening with the
Yeah.
nervous system regulation overall, all the
Yes.
ways that it is sensing danger and changing things in our body accordingly to
Mhm.
help us survive. So, whatever it
Yeah.
thinks we need more rest, we need to hunker down, or whatever it has interpreted. And then we're going to see these changes in our
Yeah.
mitochondria. But it doesn't mean that our mitochondria are broken or
Right.
working
Yeah.
improperly and that we cannot get better. Like
Right.
nervous system regulation and brain retraining won't work for us because hey,
Mhm.
have you seen my mitochondria?
Right.
They're not really pulling their weight right now. So
Right.
when we do these general approaches, our mitochondria function returns back to a typical level and
Yeah.
doesn't need to be addressed on its own. Like I need to
Yeah.
do something to
Yes.
fix my mitochondria.
Typically, yes. Obviously every person is different, but definitely getting into that autonomic nervous system on some level is going to shift the
Yeah.
function of that mitochondria. And if you're like questioning this and you're like, oh, but my provider said, whatever, read the science of the cell danger response. Maybe your provider doesn't understand that mitochondria will shift their function in a particular state of toxicity and stress. But ultimately, that science by Robert Naviaux all points to the common denominator that you shift out of that by targeting the autonomic nervous system. So, yeah, think of the mitochondrial dysfunction or a different function is a downstream effect of a host of burdens that have been placed on the body. And the most direct way to unburden the body, regardless of your toxin test, pathogen test, is targeting that autonomic nervous system. We need that to be on board if we're going to be doing things like detox or
Mhm.
even pathogenic killers. If you choose to do that, it's really best to do that with the autonomic nervous system on board.
And you can see where people get confused with all of this because we talk a lot, and I am so guilty of this. And I am working to change that because the way I have been explaining certain things, I think, has been adding to the confusion because we've been trying to differentiate between treating conditions that are coming from some sort of tissue damage or pathology or structural damage
Mhm.
versus things that are coming from nervous system dysregulation and
Yeah.
learned pathways in the brain. So we're
Yes.
saying it's like either something, broken in the body that needs a
Mhm.
physical intervention, or it's the brain and the nervous system that need regulating and we need to do some rewiring there. However, even when it's the latter, even when it's rewiring your brain and regulating your nervous system is what it's is going to reverse these symptoms, in this state, it causes physical things that you can see in
Yeah.
your body. People are
Yeah.
like, "But what do you mean there's no structural damage?" Like, "I got a rash. I can see it." Like,
Yeah.
like, there's different my blood pressure has changed. My heart rate is different. My mitochondria are functioning
Yeah.
differently. Like, there are physical things
Yeah.
happening. So, it's a challenging one to get people to accept. I can
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah, you're having to accept two different paradigms. The old paradigm, the medical model of I have a symptom, there must be something in my body that is lacking or too much and I need to address that. And the new paradigm, which is the systemic model of in some way my mental, physical, emotional system is out of balance and that needs to be addressed because the downstream effect of that imbalance is that I'm having body symptoms. And I really like to combine both ideas here, meaning, I think when we first started getting into this whole brain retraining world, it was like, ignore the body fully and just brain retrain. And there is a time and place for that, especially with chronic pain. Chronic pain is something where you really want to pull out of the fix it mentality. There's so much research on that. However, there are certain people who might be living in a very moldy environment. And I think it's totally fine to be taking binders and doing brain retraining. Like you don't
Yeah.
have to choose. There are certain conditions, and this is where working with a coach to help you, like, should I be doing anything? And there are certain conditions I would say, no, leave that be and just focus on your emotional world because it's feeding into the problem. And then there are
Mhm.
other situations where I'd be like, yeah, it would make sense to support your body because it has went through a type of true physical impact from whatever it was. And so it's nuanced, and that's why everybody's journey is so different. But the
Yeah.
bottom line is still that the foundation, the root issue to be addressing is the common denominator behind all of these things, which is your autonomic nervous system.
All right. So, understanding this, everything that you've just explained, what does that then mean for recovery? What do you do in primal trust? Like, how do you walk people through this? What does that
Mhm.
look like?
So I know what I've just described seems really complex. Your mitochondria are having a different function. Your autonomic
Yeah.
nervous system is doing, going haywire. You might have pathogens and toxins in it. We're often looking for a complicated solution because that's often the path we've been on, taking dozens of supplements, these 3-hour protocols. But actually, it starts with bringing things back to the foundation. In other words, there is this identity structure that starts to get formed with chronic illness that makes things really complex, uh, full of lots of resistance, lots of fear. And you have to reorient your psyche into simplicity. Have to start with simplicity and very simple foundational approaches to unravel this knot that has happened in your body. And that means that your brain state, the way that you're approaching life, needs to have kind of a radical shift. It's going to go from the overwhelm of all of these things and all the lab tests and all the protocols down to a simple way of starting to live your life differently. And this was we might have talked in another interview this like this letting go, this surrender moment. And really what that means is you're letting go of an old way of approaching your illness, which is this fix it mentality,
Mhm.
tracking everything, vigilance. And so in our program, what I found working with so many people is you have to just come back to the basics of awareness of what are my habitual types of thoughts, emotions, and behaviors that I am operating out of from day to day. This awareness of, oh my gosh, I think I spend most of the day ruminating about my pain or about this weird, funny neurological symptom. And I'm constantly thinking, what it could be. I'm Googling about it. I'm resisting it. I'm trying to fix it. So you have to become aware of the illness identity that is driving the stress response. And
Yeah.
so many of you are like, well, no, it's the mold and the pathogens that are driving the stress response. Yes, they contribute to the stress response, but your approach to how you are feeling is the number one thing driving the stress response. So we start people literally throughout the day, just interrupting whatever they're doing and just simply being aware. What have I been thinking and feeling over the last hour? Have I had some type of resistance to my body in some way? Have I been ruminating about what could happen in the future if this doesn't change in some way? And you start to be like, oh, wow, I'm running stress chemistry all the time. And most people
Yeah.
in these conditions, they're either ruminating or they have a type of personality that is distracting where they actually feel uncomfortable but they're on their phones and they're scrolling doing anything. That's also a nervous system stress response. That is the flee response. That's trying to run away from the danger. And the ruminating, fixating is the fight response where you're trying to figure it out. Both of those are sympathetic overdrive responses. And that pattern needs to be interrupted. And it starts with awareness of your emotional state and your habits and starting to tell the truth to yourself of, oh, I am constantly uh, in some type of stress mode. And
Mhm.
that is likely contributing to my chronic symptoms. So you start to have a different dialogue, which is a lot of how I'm feeling this pain, this funny, brain fog. It's because I'm perpetuating the stress chemistry. So, as simple as that seems to just acknowledge how you're feeling, it is a pattern interrupt into the habitual identity that is either fleeing or fighting the chronic illness.
And it's such a massive 180 from what most of us think we should do to recover. We think we need to be hyper focused. We have spreadsheets, like we are tracking things constantly. We never stop researching. If we take a break and like smell some flowers, that's time wasted because we should be so fixated and worried about trying to save ourselves. I remember I had a 4-inch ring binder of stuff from my doctor, and I'm like, I should be reading through it more, but none of it makes any sense to me. And I don't know what to do with this. And
Yeah.
it's just hearing you explain it, my shoulders just dropped. And what I would have given to have heard that, when I
Mhm.
was going through this. And I think most of us like that's just no, no, I must
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
coming at it with everything I've got.
One thing that might be helpful, and maybe you can overlay this over the interview, there's something that I did to help me with this. So, just like you, I was like obsessively tracking and thinking, I need to figure this out. And so I had an identity that thought I couldn't heal it unless my conscious mind could figure out all the
Mhm.
biochemical needs of my body. And one day I came across a graph of the human metabolic pathway. So if you're listening, or maybe it can be laid over the top, just Google human metabolic pathway and you're going to see this chart that is so complicated with hundreds or thousands of different biochemical processes. And I looked at this chart and I was like, there's no way I can figure this out. There is some greater intelligence at play that knows all of these biochemical processes, and there's got to be an innate wisdom here. In fact, none of my doctors likely know this whole metabolic pathway chart. And yet I'm trying to wait for one of them to save me as well. And it was
Yeah.
a way that I started to pattern interrupt my fix itself. So I would do brain retraining at the time and I printed out this human metabolic pathway chart. And I would like hold it up and I'd look at it every time I was ruminating, I'm like, Kat, you're not going to figure that out. And your doctors aren't going to figure that out. This is insane. Like, you can't figure this out. And that is not the way out. Consciously trying to figure out how to regulate unconscious processes, like exactly what enzymes my liver is dealing with right now, is impossible,
Yeah.
Kat. So this is not your way out. You will never figure your way out. So that was one trick that I used that actually was really helpful to get me out of disillusionment that I could figure out or fix the problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I hope you burn that chart at some point.
Yeah.
Oh, talk about a way to add stress. Okay, so people simplify this. We're doing all the things. We're understanding the role of the nervous system and the brain and the threat response and all of that. And we know that the symptoms don't go away. Like you can't rest them away. You can tell yourself you're safe and everything is fine all day long, laying in bed, and you're probably not going to get very far. Eventually, you have to start expanding your
Mhm.
activity and
Mhm.
doing some slowly,
Yeah.
doing some little things, which is can be a scary place to
Yeah.
navigate, which works against us because we're trying to reduce fear and there's a lot of
Yeah.
confusion and there's no one really has a map for you to follow. So, like,
Yeah.
I don't know, what does this mean for me? So, how do you guide people through that? Like, how
Yeah.
much activity should they do? How fast? And if they do
Yeah.
activity and symptoms come on, should they stop and dial back?
Mhm.
Does that mean they're doing too much?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a really good question and a nuanced question, but I describe it like this. If you've learned about the polyvagal theory, we learn that in a normal day to day, we have periods of activity and sympathetic activation, which is normal, and periods of rest and digest and parasympathetic activation. So our body needs to learn to go up and down in the nervous system. And some people will go into such a dorsal vagal collapse waiting to all of a sudden get energy and be able to get into activity. That's not going to happen. We have to show our body and our nervous system that small amounts of activity are okay, even if we have some symptoms. And so, yeah, there's often like a type of baseline, like, oh, normally I can walk about 1 minute. And I would say that you keep that baseline no matter what. So let's say you wake up and you have a bad day. Okay, you're having a bad day, but you're still going to walk that minute, even though you have symptoms that day, because you keep your baseline. Um, and on good days, you add a little more to it. I don't like to track. I'm not a big fan of incremental training and tracking. I don't really believe. I never did that because I worked with chronic pain for years and I found it was more rumination and obsession,
Mm.
but it's more of like a general like sense of, even though I have woke up with this bad day, I need to keep my nervous system having some activity and some rest, just like I do on every other day. Now, that day might not be a day that you go do a whole bunch of things, but you're still going to live. So I would literally get up out of bed and I'd stare in the mirror and I'd say, I'm going to live to get today, even though I didn't sleep last night and I feel dizzy and I feel these things. I'm going to live today. I still get to live with these symptoms. And I started to teach myself. It was interesting to say it, to proclaim it in the mirror. I'm going to live today. And that's ultimately the general idea here, is that you're still living with the symptoms. You're still choosing to go out into the world, and sometimes those days are uncomfortable and sometimes you have more symptoms, but what you're going to do is you're going to use your tools of sending signals of safety while having signals that might feel like suffering at the same time. And what happens is you start to develop something called cognitive flexibility, where you can be with two different experiences, and that ultimately sends a signal to your limbic system that having some symptoms while having activity is also safe, because they're not resisting it, they're not avoiding it. And that's what you need to retrain. We need to retrain that activity Plus, some symptoms can still be something that the body can handle. And I'd have to do that. I'd look in the mirror and be like, my body can handle this
Mhm.
because this is not crazy amount over my baseline. It handled it a few days ago. It can
Yeah.
physiologically handle it, even though I'm uncomfortable. Both things are true.
I love that so much that it's your evidence and you don't let yourself or your nervous system backslide when you have symptoms. Like I could walk a minute yesterday, I could walk a minute the day before, so I can walk a minute today. I have symptoms, it's going to be uncomfortable, but this is an opportunity to show my brain and nervous system and remind it, yeah, we can walk a minute. Everything's
Yeah.
okay. I'm
Yeah.
going to be fine. And that I'm gonna live today, I wanna have, like, stenciled somewhere. I've never heard that either. I think that's really powerful, a
Yeah.
really great way to start your day. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
Another thing that comes up a lot when people are, like, I'm going to live today and I'm going to live my life and I have events coming up and I'm going to go to them because I know that I can and it's important to me. And I know that physically I can do this. So they have whatever event coming up in a week or a month. But then the time leading up to that, they have so much
Mhm.
anticipation anxiety. Like, am
Yeah.
I going to be okay? What if I can't do it? What if it makes me feel really bad? What if my
Mhm.
symptoms are so intense when I'm in the middle of it? What if it takes me weeks, after to feel okay? And before the event even happens, they have so many symptoms from all of that.
Yeah.
So, how do you coach people to get through or to work their way through that?
Yeah. So, one of the things that we talk about in Primal Trust is the development of something called the inner adult main personality. And you might hear of this as like the inner capital S self with parts work, but it's a brain state that you learn to develop that is the most certain adult part of you. And this particular brain state is really important to develop over time because this is the brain state that you ultimately want to be the driver of your bus. And so, what's happening with these people is they have scared parts and protective parts of them that they have habitually allowed make decisions in their life. And so, these people tend to make decisions based on how these parts feel. And so then there's this event, and there's going to be some parts that are like, I don't know. And when we entertain the fears of those parts and we aren't certain about the decision we have made to go, those parts actually do control the autonomic nervous system because they become sort of the loudest voice or the voice that we end up having emotional allegiance to. So the key is where your emotional allegiance is with the thoughts in your head. And when you learn to develop this inner adult main personality, and that's very imperturbable, it's very certain, when that part of you makes a decision, you learn that your emotional allegiance is with that part. So when these voices creep up and they're like, oh, but I might not feel well, your emotional allegiance is not with that. You're used to that voice. Yeah, I know you're always afraid you're not going to feel well. But here's the thing, we're going to go whether or not we feel well because we've chosen this. We've chosen this. And you have to get really certain of your choices. And this takes a little bit of time to sit with yourself and you think about that event and you decide, do I want to do this? Is it worth if I don't feel well? Is it worth if maybe I have some aftermath effect? And if it is worth it, you choose it. And there's nothing that, these voices are like, I've chosen, you just say, I've chosen it. We're doing this. I'll handle it. I've already chosen this. So you need to find this inner certainty to be able to navigate those things. And then what's going to happen over time is the voice is going to get used to you choosing and it's going to die down in its intensity. And it will also die down in its ability to basically influence your autonomic nervous system. Over time, these aspects of your psyche are going to be like, oh, yeah, mom's driving the bus right now and she says we're going. It's just like with children. When an adult is like wishy-washy and the kids can whine and throw tantrums and the mom changes their mind, the kids
Yeah.
learn that the whining changes mom. If a mom is like, "No, we're doing this," the kids learn that mom's choice is mom's choice and they won't whine and tantrum to the same extent because they know that there's no point in doing it. It's very similar to that.
I love that you brought up the mom and the kids because the whole time you were talking, I was thinking, it reminds me about something I learned in a book. I can't recall which one, so I can't credit it. But it was a mom talking about how at sometimes with her kids, she goes in what she calls duck mode. And she tells her kids she's in duck mode. And it's like anything that they come at her with is like water off a duck's back.
Mm.
And they know when she's in duck mode, there's no point whining and begging and asking 18 more
Mhm.
times because never once in the history of time has she gone back on her decision when she's in duck mode.
Yeah,
So that sounds like that part of your
exactly.
brain, that parent is
Exactly.
just like you put that parent in duck mode and just the rest, you're like, nope.
Yeah.
And I even just use it I don't even have kids, but it just for when I make a decision, because then you can try and
Yeah.
talk yourself out of it.
Yeah.
Like I'm in duck mode. Nope,
Yeah.
just nope,
Yeah.
you know.
And another piece to this that's important is that you are working on developing a relationship with these kids or these inner parts that's
Mhm,
also compassionate. So you'll take time and you'll listen, like, okay, what are your fears about that? Oh, what are your
mhm,
real needs? So it's not just a full ignoring. There needs to be enough of a
mm,
relationship where you take time to feel the feels and attune to these parts where they feel seen and heard, just like these children. If mom was in duck mode all the time, eventually these children would feel
mhm.
completely abandoned and worthless. So it's not, I don't want to paint an extreme example. So there's a little bit of both, but eventually when the decision is made, that's when duck mode comes on and you go
Right.
forward that way. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Very important clarification. The example I was thinking of was children asking for ice cream. Not
Yeah.
the same thing.
Yeah.
Probably don't need to do a lot of emotional processing before
Yeah.
coming to your
Yeah.
decision. Yeah, I'm glad that you elaborated on that. Okay, so people are plugging along. They're doing all the things. Things seem to be going well, but then when you're right in it, it can be hard to know if you're making progress because we talk about symptoms are
Mhm.
necessary to move your way through this.
Yeah.
And sometimes, even when you're close to being past it, there will be symptom spikes that come up, that
Mhm.
extinction effect. And
Mhm.
so a lot of people understandably have confusion about if they like, am I doing this right? Am I on the
Mhm.
right path? How do I measure progress? I know I'm not supposed to be tracking things,
Yeah.
but I'd like to know that,
Yeah.
if I should be changing something or if I just should trust the path I'm on and just keep
Mhm.
going.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I don't love tracking, but there are some things that you can do. One of the things would be to look back, 3 months, 6 months, and say, is what I'm doing on a daily basis, do I have more activities? Am I living more? Um, what is my reactivity? How do I react to my symptoms now versus then? Am I less reactive? Basically, you're looking for behavioral changes that indicate that your limbic system has calmed down enough to give you more capacity to get back to living. And sometimes we have more capacity before our symptoms go away. And so that's a really important thing where we're often tracking our progress based on our symptoms, but really it's our freedom to live that is the indicator of progress. And some people get more and more and more and more freedom, and it might be months, and then all of a sudden the symptoms shift, but the freedom was starting to be gained all along. So you're looking at freedom in both your capacity to live, but also emotional freedom. Like, how much are you able to be with symptoms and versus maybe you were Googling all day or going into the ER a lot or, seeing doctors all the time? Do you have more emotional capacity to be with triggers?
Mhm.
Those are things that I tend to see first. And ultimately, and even maybe the most importantly, do I feel like I'm transforming as a person? Like, is this changing
Yes.
me? And so
Yes.
I used to say, early on, I said, don't focus on recovery, focus on transformation, because recovery is a goal of the ego. And there is this like sense of like, oh, when these symptoms go away, then I'll be better. This whole path is here to actually help you transform. There's a higher part of you that I believe is partnering with you that wants transformation out of this experience. It's not interested that you just have symptoms go away and you return back to the same old life. It's interested that you evolve, that you alchemize things that have been inside of you, and that you rebirth yourself. So that is the kind of introspection that I recommend. Am I transforming through this process? And let that be your sense of progress, because there can be a really beautiful um, sense of self-esteem and respect when you know that who you are as a person, as a being, is evolving and changing. And that alone can cause this relaxation in the system, because you know you're different. And if you're different, eventually your biochemistry is going to shift too.
Yeah, because when we see a lot of these rapid recovery stories that seem to happen really fast, I think when we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, and people that I interview, admit this in retrospect, that recovery had been happening for a long time, even though the symptoms were still there because
Mhm.
of all of those reasons that you were saying, the way they were reacting to symptoms, they were living their life more, transforming themselves, having boundaries, feeling emotions, doing all the things. I could go on for probably 10 minutes, listing all the different things that this could involve. And on any given day, their symptoms might not have been much less, but
Mhm.
the transformation was happening. And
Yeah.
then when it finally starts all coming into place, those symptoms disappear, and they can disappear for some people
Mhm.
quite quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now we're here. I'm taking us along the journey. So we've gotten to this place. We are transformed. We have almost no chronic symptoms anymore. We're feeling pretty much okay. Like maybe we're past this CFS or
Mhm.
long COVID. And now all the things in life that came to a screeching halt, like your job and your family obligations and your social life and going to the gym and all the things, you're like, okay, how do I? There's a feeling of like you need to reintegrate back into life, but you don't necessarily want to do it the same way as before. You don't even feel like the same person as before, and you're not sure yet. Like, is this going to
Yeah.
stick if I try and go back to the regular life? Or all the symptoms going to come back? I get so many questions around this, and I know I'm guilty that on this channel we don't talk about it nearly enough because it's a whole other phase
Yeah.
that people need insight and guidance, understandably, on how to navigate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thoughts?
that's you and I briefly touched on this in a different interview where we talk about here we are getting back into life, and entrepreneurship can have some
Yeah.
similar hardships that our chronic illness had. And we're like, "Oh gosh, this is another challenge." And what I am learning is that getting very clear on your values, which is what we teach in our level 2 program as you start to get back into the world, getting so clear on your values, what they actually are, so that you set up a life based on your values versus based on the shoulds. Um, and revisiting these values daily in a way early on, because if you can recognize, like, oh, I value community, I value nature, I value, art, and you are taking your time every day to live your values, those are like breadcrumbs that will lead you to the end that is aligned for you. If we start getting energy and we immediately just go back into sort of that old mode of like overworking, or hanging out with friends that we don't really love hanging out with, but that's the only
Mhm.
option. And we're not actually consciously recognizing, did I live my values today? Then we can end up going back in life and setting ourselves up with a similar dynamic that sometimes can cause a future pitfall, because eventually the nervous system said, you did it again. You misused your energy. You said yes when you meant
Mhm.
no. You were living for them and not for you. And I do see this a lot. I see this up and down effect where, like, oh my gosh, I'm free. And then, boom, crash. They got into an out of aligned relationship or an out of aligned job. And from what I have learned and from my mentors, is that your value system is your compass. And it seems so, again, these things seem really simple, but they are things that orient your identity to your heart, to your true self. And I know that when we live that way, we stay in alignment. And I've struggled with this myself. So starting Primal Trust, like, totally like value led at first. I mean, I loved it. It was small, it was like rich. And then I had to start running a business, which I didn't know how to do. and I just got so much work piled up because I was like trying to keep up with things the old way. I didn't take the
Yeah.
time to be like, what is my value about running a business? I've never run a business before. And you and I talked about this, and one day it was like a full hard stop. Like, oh my gosh, I am starting to run this business from this overly driven, masculine, trying to put out lots of fires. And I'm like, that is the dynamic that got me in chronic illness. And no wonder my business is no longer satisfying because
Yeah.
early on it was deeply satisfying. So I am in my own pattern interrupt where I'm like, okay, what are my values? What do I love? I love teaching. I want to do a lot of that. I love interviews. I don't
Mhm.
love these things. So I'm going to hire those things out. And I think that if I hadn't done that pattern interrupt, there would have been, some type of pitfall. So we're always learning our own medicine, including me. And yeah, I'm hoping that in the next year or two, my expression in my business will be completely different, back into that feminine and into the creative visionary and less, CEO boss mode, because I don't enjoy that. So, yeah, that's a little bit of my own personal reorientation. But yeah, your values, and you can just Google a value list, like pick a list on Google and go through them and feel into each one of them, each one of those words, and you'll pick 5 words. Pick 5 words
I'm
that are
writing that
your
down.
words. Yeah. And we do this in our level 2 program. I have them find, a few words that are their values. And every day they're writing in their journal, like, I create a life where I am and whatever these values are. So you're orienting to them daily. You write them out. You're like, okay, am I living that? Am I living that? Maybe you live it really well at home, but not in your business, which is what I was doing. Like, how do I live these values in my business? And so it's a conscious process that you have to work on daily.
Am I living my values today? That is something I also want to
Yeah.
put up on my wall somewhere. And
Yeah.
definitely, I love the idea of Googling for ideas. It
Yeah.
sounds like you shouldn't, like, you should just know,
Yeah.
but it takes some thought. And there
Yeah.
might be some things that, like, wait a minute, you see that? That is absolutely one of my values. It's
Yeah.
not something I think about a lot.
Yeah.
Putting it on the list.
Yeah.
And just for people watching, listening, I think that when we talked about this last time, we said this off camera, but it was the first week I had just finally quit my full time job that I'd been trying to quit for years. And I was doing this full time. And you and I met, and you're like, yeah, entrepreneurship is the new chronic illness. And I'm like, wait, what? You're like, welcome to your new life.
Yes. Yes. And to choose carefully.
Yeah, early days, but already definitely seeing what you mean. I'm just thinking about my own journey of coming out of this, like reintegrating back into normal life. And, some things that came up that would have been helpful to understand at the time for someone to have said to me is that sometimes you'll do something new that you haven't done since before your long COVID or your
Mhm.
CFS, and it'll bring symptoms up. Like, I
Mhm.
remember I was fully healthy and functioning. I now know that I was fully healthy, fully healthy and, able to function the whole time. But I was chronic symptom free and
Mhm.
was doing all sorts of things,
Mhm.
traveling, hitting the gym, just busy, busy, busy.
Mhm.
Felt like I can do anything. And then I
Mhm.
started trying to run again, and I started getting post-exertional malaise, and it
Mhm.
felt like the CFS symptoms were all coming back. And I was like,
Yeah.
man, I'm not really recovered. I thought that I
Mhm.
was. And just not to have that black and white thinking about it, because it is all about teaching your brain and nervous system that certain things are safe. And I had thought of running as something that was off limits for 10 years. So, of course,
Mhm.
when I jump back into it, some little alarms are going to go off like, is this
Yeah.
okay? So, I think if you, every time you are reintegrating back into your
Mhm.
activities, if some symptoms come up, it's perfectly fine. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean that you're not past it. It's just another moment for you to use all those tools
Yeah.
and be like, everything's fine. It's okay. No worries.
Yeah.
We can do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's definitely it can be alarming, but it's just a pathway that hasn't been bridged into safety yet.
Yeah.
And sometimes it makes sense. Like running is a huge biological change to the body. There's a lot more lactic acid buildup and things like that. That your body's going to be like, whoa, we haven't dealt with this in years. And it's
Yeah.
not that it can't, but there's certain things that need to be like, oh yeah, I gotta bring this back online. So it's like taking out like a bike that hasn't been ridden in a while. Like the chain kind of needs to get lubricated, right? So
Yeah.
it's that same sort of thing. Yeah, I had a similar thing. I had altitude was one of my things, and I was at a really high altitude a couple years ago, and it had been 20 years since I was at like 11,000 feet. And I got, all the weird head stuff. And I was like, oh my gosh, well, I haven't been at altitude in years. So my system needed to learn, and I just did my practices, and, I was able to be there. It wasn't comfortable, but after a couple days and okay, this is safe. This is okay. So yeah, it's just part of it. And,
Mhm.
um, the ride is bumpy. We have sensitive systems that need to be reminded that it's okay. And
Yeah.
you might have to be a little more gentle and go a little slower on that thing, but you'll be able to get the function back usually. So,
Yeah. Something else I wish someone would have told me back then is that I am a very strong, resilient person who can handle stress because I became nervous for quite a while when life would get really stressful or a lot of things were going on or I was
mhm,
emotionally struggling with something. I'm like, this is the perfect storm that we always hear about where
mhm.
CFS comes on. And I think, oh, no, no, I can't handle stress. I don't want the symptoms to come
Yeah.
back. But humans are built to handle like a lot as long as you
Mhm.
keep using those tools to not let things get so
Mhm.
overloaded and you're not repressing emotions and you're not dealing with anything, you'll be okay. I'm amazed at what I've been through in the last five
Mhm.
years without any chronic symptoms coming back. So it's just good to know that life doesn't have to be this bubble of
Yeah.
utopia for you to maintain
Yeah.
your chronic
Yeah.
symptom free
Yeah.
life. And then also, I think many of us expect a sort of utopia on the other side because we think, once I've been through this,
Mhm.
nothing can ever truly be hard again. And
Yeah.
then you get back into your life and you're like, damn, like, life
Yeah.
is truly hard again. It's something
Yeah.
else, but
Yeah.
it doesn't seem fair. You're like, but I already did that. Like, now I have
Yeah.
to deal with this. So it's, yeah, I mean, it feels great being chronic symptom free, but life does still get lifey and you can handle it. Yeah,
Right.
it's
Yeah, we
okay.
have those illness identities that think, "Oh, my life is bad because of this, and if this went away, it would be good." That
Yeah,
is, yeah, it's one of the psychological tricks too that we're stuck in. And life is life, and it's
yeah.
messy. And yeah, some people think that the definition of health is that, you never get sick, you never get stressed, and all those things. But that's not health to me. Health to me is moving in and out of states of different health states with ease and grace, meaning your system can go in and out of stress. It can go in and out of like dealing with a pathogen. It can go in and out of,
Mhm.
bouts of fatigue. So it's the flexibility that to me is what real health is, not the absence of a problem.
Yeah. One last thing I just want to say about this, 'cause I'm always trying to put out all those things I wish I'd known, and I hear so many great things with this work that I do. But I interviewed a woman named Devin Carter, and she was talking about, yeah, once you come out of this and your chronic symptoms have stopped, like you're so used to having so much worry and your nervous system and brain have been so fixated
Mhm.
on this that they can start looking for other things to worry about.
Yeah.
So if all of a sudden you're really worked up about something else, so it's, just being gentle with yourself in that process and just being aware of like, okay, have I just shifted my focus onto something else to fixate on and worry about? And, this is just a restless nervous system. Like, okay,
Yeah.
now what? Now what? If that's not the threat, what is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we often have this setup of having this inner alarm that's going off all the time before, during, and after the chronic illness because it's
Yeah.
actually a part of our psyche that uses the alarm and worry as a form of control. And we learned early on it's an addiction. It's an addiction that
Yeah.
if I have something to worry about, I'm more in control because I'm at least aware of it. And so it's an odd way of staying in control, and so we have to work with that alarm. And um, I'm blanking on his name, the anxiety MD. Can't remember his name. He wrote a good book on it. And he just talks about meeting that alarm, which is saying, "Oh, hello, I see you. I love you. I see you're trying to protect me in that old way." And just befriending the when and you have to make the connection that when you're worrying about this random thing over here, it's actually the same alarm. So this is the big
Mm,
connect. It's not a bunch of random worries of going from chronic illness to your job to your
mm,
kids. It's the same alarm that's looking for the worry. So you have to bring it back to the, oh, it's that same alarm. I'm
mhm.
doing it again. This is kind of that awareness practice we talked about in the beginning. Awareness that you have this internal set point that is scanning for safety, and you lovingly befriend it like, oh, okay, I see what you're trying to do. This is how you learn to be safe, is finding a sense of control through worry. And I don't need to do it anymore. I'm able to handle things that come up in a way that I couldn't handle them when I was young. I have more resources now. So we don't need to worry and forecast and
Yeah.
problem solve. I have the capacity to handle it. So it's speaking to that alarm slash inner psyche, inner scared child.
Yeah, we get to a place where to not worry feels unsafe. Like if I stop
Mhm.
worrying, if I take my eye off the ball, whatever that ball is,
Mhm.
something's going to go wrong.
Yeah.
And I like thinking about it from that parts work perspective. Like you have a
Mhm.
person up there in charge of worry, and they're always wanting to
Yeah.
point their worry spotlight at something. And just like you said, it's not that there are 18 things to worry about right now. It's just it's that
Yeah.
same spotlight, that same part of you that you're speaking to. Very helpful. Oh my goodness, what I would have given to
Yeah.
put you in a time capsule and send you back to me.
I
Even
could have sent me back to me too.
while you're at it, you might as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
you do you first.
Yeah.
You can be first,
All right.
but then come to me.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right. So I cannot even believe how often your program comes up. I know that you've helped literally tens of thousands of people with primal trust. So just to tell us a bit about what this program is, what it looks like what resources do you have for people that are going through this? What help can they get? Because I
Yeah.
really don't think anyone should be going through
Yeah.
this alone at this stage in the game with all the support we have.
Well, thank you. I put together a program that wove together my journey, and it's a multifaceted journey because healing the autonomic nervous system isn't just like a one-shot wonder thing. It's multifaceted. And so Primal
Yeah.
Trust walks you through the process of learning how to tone your vagus nerve, regulate your limbic system, um, uh, work with your somatic nervous system, and eventually parts work and trauma work, emotional processing. And it's done in a very careful, curated manner over several weeks and months. And so we have different courses that you take, as well as live classes that you can attend if you want. And I'm really excited for the new year because maybe by the time this comes out, we have a new program launching on February 2nd that's called 40 Day Regulate. And it's basically taking my entire program and diluting it into 5 minutes a day. So you'll get an email every day with just a short teaching and a short practice. And this is more for people who are super
Wow.
busy or overwhelmed or have cognitive fatigue because my program is very comprehensive. And so I have decided to make an easier path. And so it's called Daily Regulate, and it'll just be a few minutes a day that I'm asking you to just push play on a video. I'll give you a golden nugget in a couple minute practice. And so just stringing those days together of attending to your nervous system over time creates a new identity, an identity that attends to their nervous system as part of that root cause and helps to reorient them out of chronic illness.
I love that. And oh my goodness, the changes you could make by
Yeah.
doing that 5 minutes a day for 40 days,
Mhm.
did you say?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I bet you'd be
Yeah.
almost unrecognizable by at the end of that.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
I
amazing.
wanted to just make something a lot easier. I mean, I have a full comprehensive program for those fix-it-aholics.
Yeah.
But, yeah, just an easy entry point because a lot of times people are
Yeah.
doing these huge they're so overwhelmed and they're like,
Yeah.
"I can't even, like I can't do that whole thing." I'm like, "Okay, just push play
Yeah.
in this email and we'll make it easy." So,
Yeah, and I think the full comprehensive stuff is incredibly
yeah.
important and has a lot of value, but a lot of people understandably see it and they get overwhelmed and they're
Yeah.
just like wash their hands of all of it. They're like, I
Yeah.
can't do that. Like, this is just too much. So, the 40-day might even be your starting place that gets
Yeah.
you a good bump. And then,
Yeah.
like, okay, I think I'm ready to learn more.
Yeah.
Maybe I could do 10 minutes a day now.
Yeah.
Let me check out something a
Yeah.
little bit more in depth that helps me you transform
Yeah.
a little bit more.
Yeah.
Incredible. Well,
Yeah.
all of this, of course, linked in the video
Yep.
description. Dr. Kathleen King is having such an amazing impact on the world, doing such incredible work. So, do yourself a favor, take a moment and check out those links and just see what she has. And I'm also going to link her last interview from the last time she was here because every time you're here, you share so many amazing insights. So, there's a lot of great stuff in that one as well. So,
Yeah.
those of you watching, once you hit play, we'll both be waiting there to greet you
Yeah.
and share some more great stuff with you. Dr. Kat, thank you so much for being here. Every word of this was gold. This is brilliant. I just adore you and have so much respect for the work that you're doing. So thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And thanks to those of you watching, and we hope to see you in this next video.